It's one of my biggest surprises working with founding teams was that they have performance reviews for their employees. They don't have performance reviews for themselves.
You have to review yourself.
Yeah. And a lot of them are like, well, I started a company, so I don't need a performance review process. That's totally fair. And you need a mechanism, a cadence for receiving feedback.
Welcome to Manage Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work.
Today, we are on our third episode in our 4-part series on co-founder conflict with Annie Garofalo. Annie, I'm so excited that we've been having these conversations. These episodes are flying by, so I truly hope that the audience is enjoying them as much as we are. Today, we're going to dive into the growth gap. This is an area where sometimes I help startups as well. The skills that got you to the seed round are not always the same skills that are going to get you to a Series B, right? So, and also, you might have really enjoyed that, and then you might not enjoy the after, right? For instance, I worked on an IPO, loved it, hated public company life, just was not for me, right? And so how does this work, right? When one co-founder can scale and one can't or doesn't want to?
It's a tough situation, and I find that typically that shift happens with both people knowing and it goes completely unsaid until the person who no longer likes doing their job just checks out or isn't doing it well because they're not energized by it, and the other person is disappointed in that and starts to build up resentment, and it just creates this unnecessary divide where in an ideal world, we normalize that not everyone grows with the company and we have a great path for the exit plan, the transition, that departure, and you have a space to have those conversations and start to say, you know, so much of my role, like in the past few months, has been amazing, and looking forward to the next stage of the company, like I don't think I'm the right person for that. Yeah. That doesn't have to mean that you leave the company in a huff. It could mean reframing your role, recreating it, but doing that in partnership with your co-founder. And this is also getting back to like, this is an us versus the problem being this job no longer motivates you. How can we solve that together?
I think one interesting way to have that conversation are these co-founder mode cards that you have designed. And one of them is, today my role is focused on blank to help us get to blank. But after that, I see my role shifting too. And I think that really helps the person to have the conversation, because sometimes you may know you're not feeling invigorated and inspired anymore, but you don't necessarily know why. You're not really sure what it is about it. Is it the stage? Is it just the current problems? And I think these cards are such a great way to ask very pointed questions.
Yes.
So how do you recommend folks play them? Like, how do you recommend using these? Maybe in your 45-minute meeting that you have.
Yeah, I'd say any way that is easy to incorporate into your existing workflow or your existing meeting cadence. So if you're already having a partnership meeting, like what I talked about in the last episode, add in one of these questions as an icebreaker at the beginning or as a close-it at the end. Maybe you don't have that, but you have a stand-up on Mondays, and maybe that's focused more on company operations. Bring these cards in to give a little glimpse, a little time to the partnership, and add like one card in as a little like space for that. Or add a time to your calendar. That's a 15-minute co-founder mode check-in. That's what the card deck is called, co-founder mode. Turn on co-founder mode for 15 minutes, go through a few of these questions, which are categorized in terms of trust building, collaboration building, feedback delivery, and pick the flavor of conversation that you want to have that week.
The flavor of conversation. I love that.
I have seen it work in two circumstances.
Okay.
One is when you're co-CEOs with a timeline on it to say, like, we're starting this company. We actually don't have enough information on what each of us is good at, what motivates us, if we have product market fit, you know, all these uncertainties in the early stages. So they say, we'll be co-CEOs until we figure that out. But as we said in the last conversation about just avoiding it, putting it in the graveyard, no, you need to have a specific date where you will revisit it. And then you will define the roles. The failure mode that I've seen with co-CEOs in that circumstance is that they use it to punt the conversation on who will be the CEO because it's like they both are vying for it.
Got
So
it.
it's like the reason behind it is, if the reason is we really genuinely don't have enough data, and this is my first time starting a company, but I would be equally happy with any other position, fine. If it's something you're vying for and you are using the guise of co-CEOs to just not have this conversation, then that's not great. The other second circumstance that I've seen it work in is if you've been like CEO and CTO and you're looking to make the switch, which I've actually seen some teams do. I interviewed a team on my podcast, How I Met My Co-Founder, where they actually a few years in did switch roles.
Interesting.
In that situation, I could see there being, again, a temporary overlap for the co-CEO model.
I love that. The switching of the roles. I think the most important thing is understanding when you're a founder that it becomes more about the company than yourself and making the decisions that are really the best viable decisions for the longevity of the company, not necessarily you as an individual person. And I think that's such an important mindset shift because we're so used to being individualized and individual contributors, and that's kind of a cultural thing here in the US, whereas in other countries it's not as individualistic. Yeah. So let's say we have a co-founder who we feel is underperforming. And we've talked a little bit about how to have those hard conversations. I think the cards are probably also a really great way to get into this. But there's not necessarily a feedback mechanism to give peer-to-peer feedback to your co-founder. How and what do you recommend that co-founders do to ensure that they are keeping these open lines of communication?
Yes. It's one of my biggest surprises working with founding teams was that they have performance reviews for their employees. They don't have performance reviews for themselves.
You have to review yourself.
Yeah. And a lot of them are like, well, I started a company, so I don't need a performance review process. That's totally fair. And you need a mechanism, a cadence for receiving feedback. Some principles that I'll put in on that for co-founders specifically is it always helps to start with a self-reported performance review. So maybe it's an annual review process, but really it's just a time for you to reflect on your own performance in a structured way and say, this is what I'm really proud of this year. These are some things I want to work on in the next year, and these are the areas, that I want my co-founders' support on.
Yeah.
And present them with that, like share that with them and use that as a starting point to deliver some feedback. That also makes it more of you're giving yourself feedback first, and your co-founder doesn't have to feel that pressure of doing that or potentially saying something that might trigger your defenses when in actuality you completely agree.
Right.
I think that's one. And the other is that in those conversations, that should never be the first time you're hearing that.
Right.
Like
just as with any performance
review. As it is with any performance review, any reflection, like a reflection is you picking up on a pattern. And you need the regular data points to be able to identify that pattern. I think the co-founder mode sessions, the partnership check-ins, different meetings or ad hoc feedback, like those are your small data points. You need time every year to connect those dots and figure out what your pattern is. And you're just doing yourself a disservice if you're not carving out that time.
And this comes back to what we've talked about, self-awareness, right? And so if you're not doing the work on yourself to make sure that you're improving and make sure that you're getting that feedback, that you yourself are going to stagnate, right? And then that's not great for the company or your co-founder.
And it's not your co-founder's job to manage you. And it's not your job to manage your co-founder. Like, I feel like I sometimes have to say that. Like, you're not their, in most situations, you're not their boss.
Right.
And they're not your boss. And you're doing this to be peers. So create a system that feels peer-led.
I feel like that's a great one for marriage as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so on that note, when we start to help founders transition from I do everything to I have to let go of my Legos, I have to let go of my baby and allow other people to do things, this is an area where I also come in to help because most of this is very process-driven. It's very operational. How do you help founders transition from that I am everything to what do you mean everyone else is doing stuff now?
It's hard. It is not easy going from that like individual contributor owning, and individual contributor is not even the right word, but doing a lot of that like executional, operational work, hands-on work, usually to someone who's not going to do it as well as you for a number of reasons. Like they didn't start the company. Usually you're bringing on early hires that don't have that much experience.
Yep.
And so it's a reframe of like, you're no longer doing the work that you do really well. You're empowering other people and teaching other people to do that work and train them to do that really well. The biggest thing is just carving, like mentally saying this is going to take, it's almost going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what you kind of share with clients of actually a lot of your work right now is training that person and doing some of the execution work and some of the training work, but in a way that in the long run gives them that autonomy.
Yes.
So I think like tactically there's that. Then there's that other question of like emotionally, what are you ready to give up and what are you really not? And why are you not ready to give that up? Maybe you feel there's a tight link to the success of the company with that project, then maybe don't delegate that. So helping to be really thoughtful about prioritizing what you're working on and what you're delegating, not only in terms of what the company needs, but also in terms of like emotionally, is there something there that is tying you to it? And maybe that's there for a reason. So maybe listen to it.
Yeah, I did recently speak with a founder who discovered he wanted to be in charge of product. Like he actually hated being CEO. So the more stuff that he gave away, the more he transitioned from doing everything and he was doing CEO stuff, the more he realized that even though it was his idea, his company, his baby, he actually wanted to run product. He didn't want to run the whole company. And it was such an eye-opening experience for him. But then it's also very ego-driven. So there's a certain amount of personal identity from being the CEO, right? And so how can people work through that to make sure that they're doing the things that actually bring them joy and things they really love regardless of the title?
Yeah, I mean, there's two.
Other than self-awareness.
Yeah, like self-awareness definitely. But also, I think there is like some work to be done on the ego side. Like really saying, do I want my work to be fueling my ego or do I want it to be fueling my life?
Exactly.
And again, like I don't pass judgment on what your answer is. I'm like, sure, if you choose ego, fine, and then go the route of CEO. Yeah. If you choose that you want it to be kind of motivating or you want to craft your job in a way that's most motivating and optimizing for your day-to-day, go the product route, but it does come down to that reflection. I will say there's also cases where you can maintain your job title but kind of craft how you spend your time behind it. And it's not just tasks and what you're working on. It's also relationships. It's how you frame your role in this company. I'll offer kind of job crafting is a research term. And the research on this showed that there's two groups. They studied janitors in a hospital.
Okay.
And there were two groups of janitors. When you asked them what their job was, they described it differently. One group described it as we mop the floors, we clean the hospital, make sure everything's sanitary. The other said, we do all that, but I view my job as helping the patients get better faster. So in addition to their job, they would move photos around for patients in a coma because they knew that changing the stimulus around them could help them wake up faster. Or they would talk to the families of patients to help with the support. So they viewed their job much more holistically and the researchers found they were much more satisfied at work. So their job titles were all the same. Their tasks were all the same. It was all about how they framed their job. I think that founders too can kind of take that premise and they have the agency to do a lot more crafting. But taking the opportunity to do that is hard.
I love that. Coming from someone who's had what I would call more of like, I think now they're calling it a portfolio career. I've always called it a jungle gym. But really at the beginning of the year, setting out and saying, what skills do I want to learn this year? Not what title do I want to have, not what role do I want to have, but what are the 3 skills that I really want to walk away from this year with? And I think the more that you look at the skills and what you actually want to be doing versus the title, the happier you will be in life in general.
Yeah. I think that is true in large part. And if you want to go the route of like, if you're more like title driven and that's what you really want to do and check that off your box, go for it. But also know that there might be sacrifices along the way.
But people are also making up titles these days.
That's true.
I think I just recently saw like a chief experience officer.
Sure.
Right? I think you can really make it into what you want these days.
I am big on like creative teaming. So like a question I get, and I know this is maybe not related to this exact topic, but is like, when should I find a co-founder?
Oh, okay.
And my answer to that is maybe you need one, maybe you don't. Yeah. But before you go all in on sharing your company with someone, why don't you hire a founding head of something first?
Oh, I like that.
So if you don't have the right person in mind, you haven't worked with someone and you want to get more information on them, use that kind of creative titling, creative teaming to experiment, get more data before jumping in headfirst into the co-founder relationship, which is a fraught one and comes with a lot of assumptions around the co-founder title.
I love that. This has been our third episode in our co-founder relationship series. We have only one episode left. Annie, I'm so sad. This has been a really great conversation on sort of the growth gap. So as the co-founders are growing and evolving, as the company is growing and evolving, how do things change? You can find everything about Annie in the show notes, and we will see you on the next episode of Managed Chaos Podcast.
Outsourcing your US tech talent shouldn't be hard. With Pobble.io, we deliver high-quality teams on demand and provide huge cost savings to your business. Try it now at Pobble.io. Mention the amazing guys at Managed Chaos when you email us and get a free market data report. Email contact@Pobble.io.